There are 5 foods sitting in your refrigerator right now that were perfectly safe the day you cooked them. But the moment you reheat them the wrong way, something changes inside that food. Not the taste, not the smell, something you can't see, and something you can't taste either. I'm Dr. Michael Sr., and in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly which foods turn risky in the microwave, why it happens, and what almost everyone gets wrong without realizing it. Most of us grew up believing leftovers were simple. Cook it once, eat it twice, maybe 3 times if the portion was big enough. Nobody ever taught us that the food itself can quietly change between the first meal and the second one. Nobody taught us that reheating isn't just about getting something warm again, it's about what already happened to that food before it ever went back into the microwave. Stick with me, because there's one mistake, a very common one, that flips a safe leftover into something your body has to fight against. It's a mistake almost every household makes at least once a week, usually without ever knowing it happened. And the 5th food on this list surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. It's not what you'd guess, and by the time we get there, you'll understand exactly why it belongs on this list. So before you reheat tonight's leftovers, let's slow down for a few minutes and talk about what's actually happening on that plate, in that container, and in that pot sitting on your stove right now. Here's the thing most people don't know. It's not really about the food itself. It's about timing, how long that food sat out, how it was cooled, and how it's reheated. Get that one part wrong, and even a healthy, well-cooked meal can work against you instead of for you. I'll explain exactly what that mistake is, and how to avoid it completely in just a moment. But first, let's go food by food, because each one teaches you something a little different about what's really happening in your kitchen. Let's start with something almost every home cooks at least once a week: rice. You make a big pot, you eat what you need, and the rest goes into the fridge for tomorrow's lunch. Seems harmless, right? Here's what's actually going on. Raw rice can carry a type of bacteria called Bacillus cereus. This bacteria is naturally present in soil, and small amounts can end up on rice grains before they're ever packaged and sold. Cooking kills most of it, but this particular bacteria has a defense trick. It can form spores. Spores are like a hard outer shell that helps bacteria survive conditions that would normally destroy them, including the heat of boiling water. So when rice is cooked, some of those spores can survive the cooking process. That's normal, and on its own, it's not dangerous. Your stomach can handle a small number of dormant spores without any issue at all. The danger shows up after cooking, if the rice sits out at room temperature for too long. Those surviving spores wake up once the temperature drops into that comfortable middle range, somewhere between body temperature and a warm room. And once they wake up, they start multiplying, sometimes doubling in number every 20 to 30 minutes under the right conditions. As they multiply, they release a toxin into the rice itself. And here's the part that surprises people. This toxin doesn't get destroyed by reheating. You can microwave that rice as hot as you want, you can boil it again, you can fry it in a hot pan, and the toxin stays active regardless. Heat kills the live bacteria, but it can't undo the toxin that bacteria already released. Your stomach pays the price the next day, usually within a few hours, with nausea and stomach cramping that can feel a lot like simple food poisoning, because in many ways that's exactly what it is. The fix isn't complicated though. If you cool your rice within an hour of cooking it and keep it refrigerated at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the spores don't get the window of warm temperature they need to multiply. Reheating it the next day is then perfectly fine and perfectly safe. So the danger was never the rice itself. It was the hours it spent cooling on the counter while dinner wrapped up. That's the mistake almost everyone makes without even thinking about it, because it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like waiting for food to cool down before putting it away, which seems responsible, not risky. Now, this idea that the real risk isn't the reheating, but what happens in the hours before reheating, applies to more foods than you'd expect. And the next one on this list works in a similar way, but for a completely different reason, one that involves a food most American households eat several times a week. Chicken is one of the most common proteins in American kitchens, and it's also one of the foods people worry about reheating the most. Here's what most people miss, though. Reheating chicken itself isn't the dangerous part. The danger is in how the chicken was handled between the first cooking and the second heating. When chicken is cooked properly the first time, reaching an internal temperature of at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit, it kills the harmful bacteria that might have been present, things like Salmonella or Campylobacter, 2 of the most common culprits behind foodborne illness in poultry. At that point, the chicken on your plate is genuinely safe. The problem starts if that cooked chicken sits in what food scientists call the danger zone. That's the temperature range between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, where bacteria multiply the fastest, sometimes doubling in number in as little as 20 minutes. If chicken sits in that zone for more than 2 hours, say, left out after dinner while everyone's chatting and cleaning up, or left on the counter while you finish other chores, bacteria can grow back to unsafe levels, even though the chicken was perfectly safe right after cooking. And here's the part that genuinely surprised me when I first read into this. Reheating doesn't fully reverse that damage. Heat kills the live bacteria again, yes, but some bacteria, like certain strains of Staphylococcus, produce toxins while they're growing in that danger zone. Just like with the rice, some of those toxins can survive the second cooking because the toxin itself is far more heat resistant than the bacteria that made it. So you end up eating chicken that looks completely normal, smells completely normal, and tastes completely normal, but carries a toxin load your body still has to deal with. This is exactly why some people get sick from chicken that was definitely cooked all the way through and walk away confused about what went wrong. The fix is straightforward and it doesn't require anything fancy. Get chicken into the fridge within 2 hours of cooking, or within 1 hour if your kitchen is especially warm, like during a hot summer evening with the stove still running. When reheating, make sure it reaches an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit all the way through, not just warm on the outside while the center stays cool. A simple meat thermometer, the kind you can find for $10 or $15 at almost any hardware or kitchen store, solves this in seconds, and it's one of the best small investments you can make for kitchen safety. This pattern, safe food turning risky because of a gap in proper handling rather than the reheating step itself, is exactly why the next food on our list catches so many health-conscious people off guard, because they think they're doing something good for their body, and in most ways, they actually are. This one tends to surprise people because spinach feels like the last food that could ever cause a problem. It's a vegetable, it's healthy. Doctors tell you to eat more of it, not less. So why would reheating it matter? Here's the body system most people never think about when it comes to food. Your blood's ability to carry oxygen, and a compound in your body called hemoglobin. Spinach, along with other leafy greens like beets, celery, and lettuce, naturally contains compounds called nitrates. These nitrates aren't dangerous on their own. In fact, in small, fresh amounts, they're linked in research to healthy blood flow and even improved exercise performance, which is part of why spinach earned its reputation as a health food in the first place. The issue is what happens when cooked spinach is left out, then reheated, especially more than once. As the spinach sits at room temperature, even in a sealed container, those nitrates can slowly convert into a related compound called nitrites. And when nitrites are reheated and exposed to certain proteins, particularly under high heat, they can form compounds that your body has to process through the liver before they can be safely cleared out. In small amounts, this isn't something to panic about. Your liver handles small exposures like this regularly as part of its everyday filtering work. But repeated reheating, especially reheating the same batch multiple times over several days, increases that nitrite conversion each time, building up an exposure that's larger than any single serving would suggest. The insider knowledge here is this: it's not about avoiding spinach, and it's definitely not a reason to stop eating leafy greens. It's about not letting cooked greens sit around for days and reheating them over and over, treating one big batch like it's meant to last the entire week. If you're making a big batch of sautéed spinach, cream spinach, or any spinach-based dish, the better approach is portioning it out into smaller containers right after cooking and reheating only what you'll eat in that sitting, rather than reheating the entire pot multiple times across the week. The leftover portions you're not eating that day should stay refrigerated and untouched until their turn comes. Simple change, real difference, and it costs you nothing but a few extra containers. Now here's where things get interesting, because the next connection is one that even surprised me when I first came across the research, because it ties something you'd never expect, something sitting in your frying pan, to inflammation throughout your entire body. This next one isn't a single food exactly, it's something almost every fried or sautéed meal touches: the oil. And this surprised me when I first read the research, because most people assume oil is just oil. Reheat it, reuse it, no big deal, right? It's just sitting in the pan. But oils have what's called a smoke point, the specific temperature where the oil starts to break down chemically rather than simply getting hot. Every time you reheat oil, say frying something on Monday, then using that same oil again on Wednesday for another meal, you push it closer to that breakdown point, and it crosses that point more easily each time it's reused because the chemical structure of the oil has already started to change. When oil breaks down repeatedly, it forms compounds called aldehydes, along with other oxidized byproducts that weren't present in the fresh oil at all. Here's the connection nobody talks about. These oxidized compounds have been linked in research to increased oxidative stress in the body, and oxidative stress is one of the quiet, often invisible drivers behind chronic inflammation. So that achy joint that's been bothering you, that low afternoon energy that hits every day around 3 o'clock, that sluggish digestion that never quite feels right, reused, overheated cooking oil can be one small but real contributing piece of that larger puzzle. It's rarely the only cause of any of those symptoms, and I want to be honest with you here. It's not going to be the reason behind a serious health condition all on its own. Inflammation has many contributors, and oil is just one small piece sitting alongside diet quality, sleep, stress, and activity levels. But it's one of those small, repeated exposures that adds up quietly over years. The kind of thing that doesn't cause a problem in week 1 or month 1, but matters more by the time you've been doing it for a decade. The fix is easier than people expect, and it doesn't require throwing anything out unnecessarily. Use oils with higher smoke points for high heat cooking. Avocado oil, refined olive oil, or avocado oil blends hold up noticeably better under repeated heat than delicate oils like extra virgin olive oil or flaxseed oil, which are better saved for drizzling rather than frying. And when oil starts to look darker than usual, smell slightly different, foam more than it used to, or smoke at a lower temperature than it did when it was fresh, that's your sign to replace it, not reheat it again for one more use. Small kitchen habit, real impact over time, and a far smaller grocery cost than most people assume. Before we move on, this next one changes everything. Because it touches a system in your body, most people never connect to leftovers at all. And once you understand it, you'll never look at a bowl of reheated mushrooms the same way again. Mushrooms are the one that throws people off the most because on paper, they seem completely harmless to reheat. They're light, they're mostly water, and they don't have the obvious raw meat warning signs that make people cautious with chicken. But here's what's actually going on, and it has to do with protein structure. Mushrooms are mostly water and protein, and they break down differently than vegetables like carrots, broccoli, or potatoes. When mushrooms are cooked the first time, their proteins begin to change shape. That's normal cooking, and it's part of what makes cooked mushrooms easier to digest than raw ones. But mushroom proteins are particularly sensitive to repeated heating and cooling cycles, more so than most other plant foods you'd typically reheat. Each time you reheat mushrooms, especially after they've sat in the fridge for more than a day, those proteins continue breaking down further, beyond the point where the change is helpful. This isn't dangerous in the way bacteria is dangerous, but it does two things worth knowing about. First, it changes how your digestive system processes them, sometimes leading to mild stomach discomfort, bloating, or an unsettled feeling in people who already have a sensitive gut, even when nothing about the mushrooms looks or smells off. Second, and this is the part that connects to something deeper, mushrooms left at room temperature for too long before refrigeration can develop bacterial growth faster than most vegetables, because of their high moisture content combined with their protein content, a combination that creates a more favorable environment for bacteria than, say, a dry vegetable like carrots would. This is not a cure-all warning, and I want to be honest with you. Most people reheat mushrooms their whole lives without any issue at all, and a single reheated portion is unlikely to cause any real problem for most healthy adults. But consistent good habits matter here, the same way they matter with everything else on this list. The safest approach is treating mushrooms more like you treat meat, not like a simple vegetable. Refrigerate them within 2 hours of cooking, the same 2-hour window we talked about with chicken, and reheat them only once, fully, until they're hot all the way through rather than just warmed at the edges. If you've got a big batch from a large recipe, portion it before storing so you're not repeatedly reheating the same dish 3 or 4 times over the course of a week, letting it cool and reheat again and again. Now here's the piece that connects everything we just talked about, and it's the one mistake sitting underneath all 5 of these foods. It's not the rice, it's not the chicken, it's not even the reheating itself. It's the cooling window, the gap of time between when food finishes cooking and when it actually gets cold inside your refrigerator. This is the root cause behind almost every reheating risk we've covered today. 5 different foods, 5 slightly different mechanisms, but one shared origin point. Food safety researchers call that danger zone the range between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The longer any cooked food sits in that range, the more time bacteria have to multiply, and the more time certain proteins and compounds have to start breaking down in ways that work against you. Most people think the second reheating is the risky step, the moment they're standing at the microwave punching in 2 minutes. It's not. The real risk happens hours earlier, often without anyone noticing, while dinner is being cleaned up, while the family's still talking at the table after the meal is technically finished, while the leftovers sit on the stove just for a bit, because the pot still feels too hot to put straight into the fridge. Think about how a typical evening actually goes. Dinner gets served around 6 or 6:30. Everyone eats, talks, maybe watches part of a show together. The dishes don't get cleared until 7:30 or 8. By the time someone remembers to put the leftover chicken or rice away, 2 hours have already passed, sometimes more. And that's exactly the window where bacteria do their quiet work, completely out of sight. I want to be completely honest with you here. This isn't about fear, And it's definitely not about throwing out leftovers or avoiding them altogether. Properly stored and reheated leftovers are safe, and they're a normal, healthy, practical part of eating well without wasting food or money. Most American households depend on leftovers to get through a busy week, and there's nothing wrong with that habit. The mistake is letting food cool slowly at room temperature instead of refrigerating it promptly. A pot of soup left covered on the stove overnight because nobody wanted to deal with it before bed. A plate of chicken left out while everyone watches a show after dinner, with good intentions to put it away in a minute. A big bowl of rice cooling on the counter for hours because it felt too hot to put in the fridge right away, and putting hot food directly into a cold fridge felt like it might somehow be the wrong move. That waiting period, however innocent it feels, is where the actual risk builds. And reheating, even reheating thoroughly until the food is steaming hot, can't always undo what happened during that gap, because as we covered with the rice and the chicken, some bacteria leave behind toxins that survive heat even after the bacteria themselves are destroyed. This is why doctors and food safety experts keep repeating the same simple rule over and over in nearly identical words. Refrigerate within 2 hours. 1 hour if your kitchen is warmer than 90 degrees, such as during summer cooking without air conditioning running, or on a stovetop that's still radiating heat into the room. It's not exciting advice. It's not flashy, and it won't make headlines. But it's the one habit that protects you across every single food we've talked about today, and honestly, across nearly every food you'll ever cook in your kitchen. Let's make this practical, step by step, so you actually use this tonight, not just nod along and forget by tomorrow. First, after cooking, let food cool just slightly, no more than 20 to 30 minutes before refrigerating. Don't wait for it to reach full room temperature, and definitely don't leave it out until after dishes are done. The old idea that hot food shouldn't go straight into the fridge is largely outdated. Modern refrigerators are built to handle it, and the small amount of extra energy used is far less important than the safety benefit of cooling food quickly. Second, divide large batches into smaller, shallow containers rather than storing everything in one big pot or one deep bowl. Shallow containers cool faster and more evenly all the way through, which limits the total time bacteria have to grow in that warm middle zone. A deep pot of soup can stay warm in the center for hours, even while the outside feels cool to the touch. Third, label your containers with the date you cooked the food, using a piece of tape and a marker if you don't already do this.